Good afternoon and welcome to 3 o'clock with SOC. Give me a second while I welcome our Spanish-speaking neighbors. Buenas tardes, gracias por estar con nosotros hoy a las 3 p.m. con SOC. Si quieren acceso al programa en español, por favor marquen el número que aparece en pantalla, que es 425-436-6200. Cuando le contestan la llamada, por favor comparten el clave o contraseña, que es 627-682. Welcome to this Thursday, May 28th, 2020, here at 3 o'clock with SOC. My name is Tammy Rivera. I'm the Executive Director and Lead Organizer for SOC, SOC, Southside Organizing Center. Please know we continue to be with you. We haven't missed a day since the pandemic started. All of our staff is virtual and here for you. You can reach us at 414-672-8090. You can email us at soc@socmilwaukee.org, and you can visit our website at socmilwaukee.org. We have an entire page dedicated to information, resources, and action you can take in response to the coronavirus. All of our staff is here attentively waiting and responding to your questions, your concerns, and helping you navigate this challenging time. We look forward to when we can see you in person again, but please know that we are still here for you. We have great guests today and tomorrow we don't want you to miss. And so please know we want to see you back here tomorrow when we're going to have Dr. Keith Posley, our MPS superintendent, and he'll be sharing about MPS's plans this summer, this fall, and what are the next steps since the spring election referendum on MPS funding. And so can't wait to hear all of that. I want to remind you that every day we give out a gift card for $25, and it's a three-way win. It's really easy to fill out our survey. You give some of your information and you talk to us about was the program helpful to you, what you like, what would you like us to change or add. You can click on the link in our comments. It takes like 5 minutes to do. And so it's a win for us because we can share those results with our team, strengthen the programming and the services for you. We share it with our funders as well, and we have to do that as a measure of accountability. And then you get $25 for these times when it's economically hard for all of us. And also it's a boost to our local businesses because we have a list of businesses that have supported SOC or are doing a really great deed, good deed during these times. With that, we want to get right to our guest. I'm just going to give a little disclaimer. It is our goal to create safe space in the community to discuss topics. And because of the type of organization we are, we can't always sign off on everything that is shared here. So I have to share this disclaimer that the views and the opinions shared on today's show do not necessarily reflect those of SOC. With that, I want to get right to it. We have a special guest, our very own Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. Welcome. Welcome, hey. Lieutenant Barnes.
Hey, how you? It's really good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while, but
it's been quite a while.
It's been a long while, but I want to thank you for having me, and I want to also thank you for having this show going to keep people informed. We have to organize in different ways now, and if we don't adapt, then we can lose out on all the progress that we've made to build our communities. up until this point. So thank you for your hard work and all the hard work of your staff, making sure that SOC is being available and accessible at a time where people really, really need it. So I'll get right to it. As Tammy said, I'm Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. And again, I just want to thank you all for having me here to join the call. First message I want to speak to you all about is something that I know is still on the minds of so many people, and that's securing democracy and our right to vote. And the spring election on April 7th, the infamous spring election, as people ask me about it wherever I go, I've done a number of interviews as the topic that's fresh on the minds of so many folks because it exposed flaws in our democracy and it exposed flaws in access to democracy. And it was an absolute travesty. It was an injustice. It shouldn't have taken place the way that it did. But it also exposed the need for us to be proactive in the way that we approach elections and the way that we approach administering elections. And there couldn't be a more important time than this, as we're seeing firsthand the consequences of the election. We unfortunately have leaders who have not stepped up to the plate, leaders who disregarded the will of the people, and they've cared more about their own careers and poll numbers and spreading misinformation on Twitter than people's lives. And it's unfortunate when that leadership comes from the top. It's unfortunate when we see 100,000 lives lost in the United States of America. But on the front end of the pandemic, when the science was there, when the warnings was there to have our president dismiss it as a hoax, and now we find ourselves in this situation, in a catastrophe in terms of our economic security and a catastrophe in terms of our healthcare system. But these are problems that we've had long before COVID-19 showed up, and they've just been exposed in a greater way. And unfortunately, in the midst of in the midst of the pandemic, we had congressional leaders that chose not to vote in support of the only relief that the federal government offered us as a country. And it's fine. I get people voting no. You can have your philosophical disagreements, but it's important that if you cast that type of vote, to at least have some sort of alternative, and that wasn't the case. And this is it's the same story, unfortunately, with the legislature right now, who has decided or has chosen not to work with us as we work to push Wisconsin to a much different place post-pandemic. We are doing everything we can do to fight the virus and to save lives. We're also thinking much more broadly about what do we want the state to look like on the other side. And the Supreme Court, where we employed our safer home order, which was proven to save lives. We saved hundreds of lives. Studies show, the models show that we could have lost anywhere from 300 to 1,400 more people here in the state of Wisconsin, but still the 500 people we've lost to coronavirus is still something that is disappointing to me, especially it should be disappointing to us all. But the Supreme Court decided to play politics and act as an extension of the legislature in striking down that safer home order. And I know it can be very easy for people at a time like this to feel like their voices don't matter when they see leaders blatantly defying the will of the people and making decisions that put people in harm's way. It's our role as government to protect people, to keep people safe. And that's not what's happened. And this is how these leaders stay in place. That's how they stay in power, by making others feel powerless. But that's what we organize. And we can go back to the example of the April 7th election, where political power was prioritized over folks' fundamental right to vote, and lives were put at risk. Black and brown voters were essentially told that their voices didn't count, or put up or shut up, either go to the polls or try to get an absentee ballot at the last minute. Many people didn't get an absentee ballot, and folks weathered the storm. They showed up. People waited long hours in line to vote in the middle of a pandemic. Their lives are put at risk. The poll workers' lives are put at risk. And, people waited in literal storms. There was rain and hail at some point where people were standing outside waiting to vote. And all that on top of voter ID, which created another barrier for people who wanted to vote. And people still found a way to get witness signatures. People still found a way to get to the poll. People still found the time. But just because they did it doesn't mean that they should have had to. And because of their tenacity and the voter advocacy work of groups across the state and across the country, they made it happen. And again, they shouldn't have had to. People shouldn't have had to jump through those hurdles, just to jump over those hurdles and jump through those hoops just to vote. But I want to let all the Southside residents know, listening in, to know that our administration is going to do everything in our power to do that we can make sure that nothing like the spring election happens again. That means supporting our local election administrators. We saw election administrators do as much as they were able to keep voters and poll workers safe. And for the most part, they did this without any additional funding. We saw municipalities across Wisconsin who spent hundreds of thousands of extra dollars to administer this election that shouldn't have taken place because the legislature and the Supreme Court said that they had to. And local governments are going to continue to work hard to keep voters safe for the remaining elections in 2020, including the August primary and the November general election. So our administration has asked the Wisconsin Elections Commission to devote some of the $7.3 million in federal CARES Act money that they're receiving to reimburse local governments for the expenses related to the spring election. And our local elections commissions, our local election administrators need this money to become whole, and so they can start planning for August and for November. And after an unprecedented 62% of all votes in Wisconsin's April election were cast by mail, turnout for the November election is expected to double that, to double the number of the spring election ballots cast. So in order for us to avoid the massive time crunch that ultimately led to disenfranchisement, we also asked the Elections Commission to allocate a portion of the federal funds to pay for absentee ballots in the 2020, for the remainder of the 2020 elections, so that clerks can proactively begin to send ballots to all applicants who are registered, or so they can send the applications to registered voters. But thankfully, places like the city of Milwaukee are already planning to do this as well. And it's important to know that there are people who are still fighting for democracy to make sure that folks can still safely cast a ballot. And ever since the Nonpartisan Government Accountability Board was eliminated by the Republican majority in the legislature, the Wisconsin Elections Commission, which is staffed by partisan political appointees, we've seen a lot of gridlock. But thankfully, they have been able to come together at least a little bit on these issues. Just yesterday, they voted to provide $4.1 million of their CARES Act funds to local election clerks to reimburse for the election-related costs. And most importantly, they voted unanimously to approve a plan to send absentee ballot applications to the roughly 2.7 million registered voters in Wisconsin. Now, our administration called on the legislature to send absentee ballots directly to all voters for the spring election, not just applications, because that creates one more unnecessary step. It also costs more money because that's more mail that has to be sent. But they refused. The Republican leadership refused to answer our calls on this issue, which is going to cost the state more money. And Democrats in the legislature have similarly proposed sending ballots directly to voters for the remaining elections, at least this year, because we know that that is the safest way for folks to exercise the right to vote. Now, assuming the leadership of the majority party in the legislature won't change their tune, at least sending the applications is a very important step. But we have to note that voters who've already requested absentee ballot for future elections will not receive an application from the election commissions, and voters who have been flagged as potentially having moved from their address that they're registered at currently will be excluded as well. This means everyone who's eligible to vote should go to myvote.wi.gov. I guess we can put that in the live comments so people can make sure that they have that website, but that is myvote.wi.gov, to make sure that they're registered at their current address and that they request absentee ballots for the August primary and the November general. If you got time, you're already on a computer, as soon as this is done, go ahead and just do it now, get it out of the way so you don't have to worry about it later. Because in the frenzy of the spring election, there was also an issue of people not knowing if their absentee ballot would arrive on time. And several boxes of ballots from the Fox Valley area actually got left in the Milwaukee post office and were never counted. People were disenfranchised because of this election taking place when it should not have in the first place. But to improve tracking and security, The Election Commission also approved spending $400,000 of CARES Act funds to put intelligent barcodes on absentee ballots so that you can find out where your ballot is in the process and you can ensure that your vote is counted. Absentee voting is obviously the safest way for people to vote for the foreseeable future. And that means we have to make that process as accessible as possible. And we're going to do everything that we can do to continue to advocate for the rights of people to vote during the pandemic and the rights moving forward, because it's about modernization. That's the conversation that we should be having surrounding elections. But we need each and every one of you to plan and prepare to and ensure that your vote is counted, as well as the votes of your family members, your community that surrounds you as well, and your friends, because we're up against forces that are already planning and preparing to disenfranchise or make it at least harder to vote the next time around. And the stakes will only be greater. And so if I could, I'd like to just take a quick moment to update you on some of the public, on some issues regarding the public health crisis and how we're continuing to respond and work towards a more just and equitable recovery. And although communities throughout the state are now moving towards reopening, our state is still very much weathering the devastating impact of the virus, especially in Milwaukee, and especially on the south side, as we've seen. And as you all know, until about 2 weeks ago, we had Safer at Home in place, and that saved at least 300 lives and potentially as many as 1,400, as I stated earlier, according to the DHS, Department of Health Services model. We knew that staying at home and keeping people from interacting was the best way to stop the spread of the virus, and it was working. We were flattening the curve in our state. But unfortunately, that same majority party in the legislature sued us, and the Supreme Court made the reckless and irresponsible decision to strike down the order, which left our state without any safety order in place. And then when we tried to work with them on statewide rules, unfortunately, we got radio silence. So local government had to step up, and thankfully, the city of Milwaukee has done so. The Moving Milwaukee Forward plan is a science-based measured approach to reopening phases, much like the Badger Bounce Back plan. But I'm concerned about the rise in cases and hospitalizations that we're seeing in Milwaukee. And although I know that Milwaukee health officials are monitoring the situation every day before they make decisions about moving to the next phase, I still firmly believe that reopening is happening prematurely. As of yesterday, we had over 16,000 positive cases of COVID-19 and over 500 deaths. And right before the recent Supreme Court ruling, we were meeting 5 out of the 6 metrics that would have put us, and that would have taken us out of Safer at Home and into phase 1 of the Badger Bounce Back plan. But now we have scaled back from 5 of 6 to 3 of 6 metrics. Those 3 that we're meeting are the downward trajectory of COVID-like symptoms reported within a 14-day period. 95% of hospitals can affirm that they are able to treat patients without crisis standards of care. And 95% of hospitals affirm that they are testing all symptomatic clinical staff who will be treating patients. Now, the 3 criteria that we are not meeting is the downward trajectory of influenza-like illnesses reported within a 14-day period, a downward trajectory of positive tests as a percentage of total tests within a 14-day period, and a downward trend in healthcare workers testing positive. Those are the 3 criteria that we are not yet meeting. And all 6 of the criteria are important, but these are 3 very critical to moving us forward and getting us to a place where we can at least feel safe. But as you all know, and as many of us expected, we've seen both the health-related and the economic impacts of the virus fall more heavily on the Black and Latinx community in our state. And though African-American community is about 6.7%, we make up 20% of our confirmed positive cases and 27% of COVID-19 related deaths. And in the Latino community, we're seeing a recent rise in cases, especially in Milwaukee. We saw it in Brown County as well. The population is almost mirrors that of the Black community in Wisconsin at 6.9% in the population. But the disproportionate impact means that the Latino community makes up 33% of the positive cases across Wisconsin. And there have been reports that much of this spike is unfortunately due to people either returning to work too soon, or if they've been working this whole time, their workplaces see more traffic as things begin to reopen. And other reports say that the rise is due to misconceptions about the virus. And I want to be very clear with people that just because you test negative today does not mean that you are safe tomorrow. We need to keep up our safety habits, including staying 6 feet apart, wearing masks in public, and staying at home if possible. And now we've been grappling with these shameful racial disparities in health and well-being for far too long. This isn't the first iteration of disparity that we're seeing. This has been going on far too long. COVID-19 is just the culprit of the day. And these disparate impacts are not the consequences of individual habits and poor choices, but rather a result of systemic issues and centuries of policy decisions that further marginalize communities of color. And the decision, for instance, to locate interstate highways in certain communities, resulting in the impact on air quality, have contributed to higher rates of asthma, cardiovascular disease, and respiratory issues. And these are the very factors that exacerbate the impact or the effects of COVID-19 in poor and neighborhoods in communities of color. And meanwhile, the ability to practice social or physical distancing to limit the spread of infection is also a little bit more difficult in higher density neighborhoods in communities of color where we see more multi-generational households. And I've been working to fight and break down these barriers my entire professional life, from my time as an organizer to my time as a state legislator, and especially now as Lieutenant Governor. That's exactly why the core principles of my office have been equity and sustainability since day one. We need equity and sustainability driving every decision, whether we're fighting a pandemic or not. And this is for us to create a state where every child can grow up in a clean and a healthy environment and have the opportunity to thrive regardless of their zip code. And I'm fortunate to serve with a governor who shares these beliefs. And I'm proud that our administration has been focused on addressing these inequities as we lead the state forward, especially through the rapid changes of this pandemic. And we've been providing direct support and resources in community, including the South Side, at the beginning of the crisis. Over a month ago, the Department of Health Services and the Wisconsin National Guard coordinated with the 5 community health centers in Milwaukee to set up the first drive-through testing sites in the state. And these were followed by the drive-through sites at UMOS on the South Side and in sites in Brown County, where we've seen COVID-19 ravage the Latinx community due to unsafe working conditions in the meatpacking plant. All these testing sites have provided free testing, regardless of insurance, regardless if you have a primary care physician. And a few days ago, the National Guard has collected, the National Guard has collected some almost 23,000 specimens in Milwaukee County, with over 12,000 of those coming directly from UMO. And on top of that, we've invested over $2 million to provide 27,000 tests directly to Milwaukee County. And we know that there has been waiting times for people to get the results of the test, and our labs are moving as fast as they are able to keep up with the demand, to keep up with the number of tests that they're administering. But I encourage everyone to exercise caution while they wait for the results, because you may be an asymptomatic carrier. So although you may not feel sick, you may feel okay, you could still be unknowingly spreading the virus to the loved ones, the people around you, and even strangers. And to help prevent the spread, we've also distributed over 300 items of PPE directly to Milwaukee County, both from the Strategic National Stockpile and from state procured PPE. That includes coveralls, gowns, masks, N95 respirators, eye protection, disinfectant spray, and alcohol wipes. But we know that these intense disparities and the suffering that we're seeing in these communities requires an equally intense response from state government. So as part of our administration's coordinated response, I've been working with a specific team to ensure a more just and a more equitable recovery for people in our state. And so we set up the Community Resilience and Response Task Force at our State Emergency Operations Center in order to integrate concepts of community resilience, equity, and mental health into our response to COVID-19, and to set the stage for changes to policy and systems that ensure that every Wisconsin community reaches its full health potential. This task force, along with a few local Milwaukee partners, is working to create a just recovery in Milwaukee with an initiative tailored to both identifying the immediate needs of communities of color in Milwaukee and laying out how we can prevent a return to normal once the immediate needs of communities of color in Milwaukee, and laying out how we can prevent a return to normal once the crisis is alleviated, because we can't afford to return to our normal of inequitable and unjust health and economic systems. We need to be thinking much bigger. We have to think much bolder, because the amount of catastrophe that COVID-19 has brought to the lives of Milwaukeeans on the South Side and the North Side proves as much. And we know that we have to work to come out of this on the other side much stronger, much more resilient, and more importantly, much more intelligent. We have to be smarter in our approach so that the impact that we're seeing never happens again, be it COVID-19, be it the economy, be it healthcare, or be it democracy. So I want to thank you, Tammy. I want to thank the Southside Organizing Center, for everything you've been doing and continue to do to keep our community informed with the best public health information and all the facts that people need to make sure that their voices are heard, whether it's in elections or, importantly, our census. And I don't want people to forget the census. And I know that COVID-19 is taking the day. It seems to be all we're talking about, but we do need to make sure that we are counted in the census so that an accurate picture of our communities can be painted and we can get the resources that we need, especially when we move into the phase of relief from COVID-19. And
Lieutenant Barnes, we have a couple minutes left. Let me squeeze in a question now that we have you. Let's share with the audience. You're the first person of color, African American man, to have the role that you have. Very proud that you were elected Lieutenant Governor. Will you share with folks what the major role and responsibility is as sort of a civic lesson now that we have everybody's ear and they're paying more attention to our legislature and our processes? This is a great time to help them understand your role.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a question that I answer probably. I get asked more than anything. What does the Lieutenant Governor do? So as Lieutenant Governor, the easiest way to explain it is if you think of the role of a president and a vice president. The Lieutenant Governor essentially serves as a vice president would. That's my role to the governor. And, I get to work on very specific initiatives, but I try to be there whenever I can. Everything has shifted, COVID-19. So a lot of it is community response, community outreach, working with organizations. But I've personally taken on, again, equity and sustainability, knowing that those are two major issues that we're facing here in Wisconsin and across the country. We have a huge problem. We have huge problems with equity, whether it's income inequality, whether it's access to health care, you name it. Those are things that we have to make sure that we are working to create a Wisconsin that works for everyone. And on the sustainability front, we know that climate change is very real and it's having a direct impact on Wisconsin as it is so many other places. And we know that communities of color often feel the impacts of climate change far worse than the broader community. So we have to come up with a coordinated approach and get people to realize that we are much stronger when we are together. And I feel like a lot of the role, because in the Constitution, there's not a lot of duties specifically assigned to Lieutenant Governor, but I see it as an important avenue to build bridges across the state, to make sure that, the people all the way up in Hurley or all the way over in Platteville understand that, Milwaukee isn't some strange place just because, we think we have these differences. And the more conversations I get to have with people, I think the more that they begin to realize that we have far more in common than they've been told.
Correct. There's something very interesting that you shared. You mentioned that the move towards getting barcodes on the ballots. While you share a little more about that, that's exciting news because there is accountability and tracking that goes with that. Share a little bit about that, and I'm going to look at the live comments to see if folks have questions for you.
Absolutely. So the intelligent barcodes will make it easier for people to track where their ballots are. And I know that since folks have been home, a lot of people have been finding themselves shopping online, ordering things. And as the time goes past, I know that a lot of people, as a pastime, has become tracking packages. And so now you can be able to track your ballot just like you would. You'll be able to track your ballot as you would be able to track a package from wherever you order things from online, which is important because, like I said, some ballots for the April election from the Fox Valley were found at a post office in Milwaukee. And that's a shame. That's shameful. And we need to make sure that that does not happen. And voters need to feel a sense of security that their vote counts and that their vote matters. And this is an extra layer to help them get that sense of security.
Super excited to hear that. Let's say some hellos and see if we have some questions for you. Hola, Chino is with us again, and Diana Becerra, Elsa, Maribel, Cypher, thank you for using your platform to inform, demand justice and accountability and keep it real with the community, Mr. Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. Justin Belinsky, two of my former bosses on one stream. Hola, Justin. Marianne, she says it in Spanish, so I'm going to translate. It's true. The persons are thinking, how are we going to open places now that we're free and it's still contagious? So that's the whole safer at home. She's saying it's true. How are we going to move forward? And it's still Rocio, hello. Esperanza Gutierrez, one of our longtime elder leaders in the community. What are the age groups for the Latino community with positive results? And what is the percentage of those tested? Do you have that handy?
I don't have those numbers
we'll track
handy.
That down.
Yeah.
We'll track that down. Commissioner Kowalik was with us the other day, and we'll follow up with her staff. Dulce says hello. Lillian says hello. Lieutenant Barnes, one last question before our time ends here. Tracking safer at home, then the Supreme Court decision to strike it down, then municipalities having to decide what they're going to do. We know that there's still litigation out there, I believe, but explain a little bit, like in 30 seconds, what the process of rules moving forward is supposed to be like. So that whole fight got moved, so Wisconsin Supreme Court put it on a pathway to the rules process. If you could, in about 30 seconds, explain what that is supposed to look like.
Well, so we had our safer home order, and the challenge was that the governor or the Department of Health Services secretary designee Andrea Palm didn't have the authority to issue an emergency order. I still contend that she does have that authority, because that's the reason for that position. And with striking down safer home, that means that none of the rules apply any longer. When it comes to safer home. So the Supreme Court, again, as an extension, we're supposed to have 3 branches of government, but they're acting as if there were 2, and it's weighted 2-1 because it's like the judicial branch and the legislative branch versus the executive branch, when we should be working together, especially when it's in the interest of people's safety.
And so then the Supreme Court says, we're sending it to a rules process, which means what, really?
Which means that the legislature should have written the rules. They had an opportunity to write the rules, and they decided that they were going to let the local government do it.
So that was the answer to the rules process.
Yeah.
Instead of creating statewide rules, they said, we're going to defer to municipalities.
Yeah, which created more confusion.
That process is completed. So then that rule process is completed now?
Well, they can come to the table if they want to and write some rules, but they decided not to. The door is always open for them to do that.
Yeah, that's very complicated for us. We'll have to have you back on another time. You definitely were prepared for the questions we told you we were going to answer, and took maximize the time with us to get the information out to folks. And so we'll have you back hopefully another time, especially around elections, how important that's going to be. We thank you so much for your presence today and your service.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Sure. Be safe.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Again, trying to share access we have to persons in power, decision makers, and anything we know or have access to, we want to make sure that our community does as well. Esperanza, we are going to track down that information. We'll have Marlene, our coronavirus coordinator, get that question, and we'll try to turn that around as soon as possible. We're going to, as Lieutenant Barnes mentioned, we cannot lose sight of the census during this pandemic, because it has an impact on all of us for the next decade. And so with that, we're going to invite our video on the census to help inspire and inform us.
You know that park you wish you had and those potholes you want fixed in your street? It takes money to build and fix these, and Washington, D.C. decides who gets it through census numbers. So starting in March, participate in the census. You can do it online, phone it in, or over the mail. And nobody else will have access to your information. Everyone should take the census, even if you're undocumented. For more information, go to WeCountCensus.com.
Definitely important to do, and our staff is here to help you do that process of getting through the census. So remember that we're here for you. Let me see if we have any new folks since I last said hello. I'm not sure if I said hello to Dulce. Hola, Lily. So hello. Is there anyone that you all want to make sure we get on the program that you want to have access to? We have a couple of folks we haven't been able to line up yet. You've asked previously that you wanted to see the election commissioner or someone from that department come on. We're working on that. We've invited the city's assessor, so to answer directly your property tax assessment questions. We're working on that. Those are two invitations that we haven't heard back from. And so is there anybody you want to see on the forum or have access to that we haven't had yet, or a repeat guest? Let me know. Share in the comments here who you would like to see on the program. While you think about that and answer it, I want to invite our communications manager, Marisol Diaz, to come on and promote our survey and gift card.
Hi, Community Forum. Reminding you of our daily $25 gift certificate drawing by filling out the survey located in the comments section. In the following day's forum, we'll announce the winner. It's a quick 5-question survey, and you can enter daily and win daily. Thanks for those of you who have been filling them out, and thanks for tuning in. Now let's find out who's today's winner.
Congratulations, Rocio Leiva. You are winner for yesterday. Please make sure to send us an email at soc@socmilwaukee.org to claim your certificate. Elsa, make sure we address special education issues with Dr. Posley. Definitely join us tomorrow so we can ask questions to him. And that's a reminder to let you all know that tomorrow, again, our special guest is MPS Superintendent Dr. Keith Posley, who's going to be talking about summer school, what's happening with MPS this summer, the fall, and what happens now with the referendum. Malaya says, let's see here. Is there maybe a couple people who can give us a perspective on what reopening with new business guidelines has been? Yes, there is. We had Nelson Soler on previously, and we can ask if he's available again. So very good question and good suggestion. Definitely. The Alas people are happy. Thank you for joining us, Familia Alas. That's a organization that a dear friend founded, and someone I very much admire, Elsa, is running. And families, Latino families with kids with disabilities, they've done some incredible work. They had a big anniversary last year or the year before, and so happy that you all are with us. With that, we want to thank you for being with us. We want to send our thoughts and prayers again to the George Floyd family, and that we want to stay united about lifting up what our expectations are of the people that we entrust to police to enforce laws. And so stay with us as we continue our work on community and police relations and our work around justice when members of the community, whether it's nationwide or locally, are murdered by police. Those few, I hope, are fewer and fewer who don't represent the badge as we expect them to the police badge. And so we want we want our law enforcement to do so effectively and humanly. And so stay with us on those journeys to better relations and more accountability. And we also want to send our thoughts and prayers to those families who and individuals who are struggling with the pandemic, with the isolation, and also those who have family or friend members, family or friends or members of their extended family who have been infected with COVID and dealing with the illness, and those who have lost ones, have lost some to it. We don't want to forget what you're going through, and if there's any way that our staff can get you connected to resources, we want to do so. And so please feel free to call us. With that, I want to remind you to be safe and join us tomorrow. And we want to thank our funding partners. We have all kinds of partners, strategic partners that we do programming with, resident leaders in the community, issue leaders in the community, other stakeholders. But we also want to thank the funders who help our programs and services be available for you all, and who have also contributed to us being able to respond to COVID. It looks like there's a couple questions and comments. Malaya, yes, the episode with Nelson, but you know, that changes often, so you want to stay connected. Yes, Lily, very sad. Esperanza, what outside activities can be done since most festival, including state fair and public blues, have been canceled, and still keep safety in mind? So if I remember correctly, when Commissioner Kowalik was on, the parks can be used as long as people are cooperating with moving Milwaukee forward and the CDC recommendations. In terms of other activities, we know that there allow drive-in type features, outside services for communities of faith, etc. If there's anybody else who have recommendations for Esperanza, we can also ask the health department again what other type of outside walking in the parks is allowed. The kids couldn't play. If I remember correctly, Commissioner Kowalik said that children or people can't use the equipment, but you can walk as long as you're doing, keeping in mind the distancing requirements, the drive-ins, etc. And so we'll find out as soon as those things get more released here locally. But if you all have more ideas, please do share. We can work on that for our website as well. All right, be safe. We'll see you tomorrow. We'll leave you with our thank yous.
Thank you to our sponsor, Wisconsin Boys Community Development Block Grant, Neo Philanthropy State Infrastructure Fund, Mudman Board Project, Catholic Campaign for Human Development, Silver Foundation, City of Milwaukee Office of Violence Prevention, Thai Foundation, City of Milwaukee Promised Son, all the faithful individuals who support SAC through the personal donation. Thank you, thank you, thank you.